So I see that a quorum is present. So do I have a motion to convene?
Yeah, I'll make a
Convening.
motion to convene. Yes.
Second? I'll second. Okay. Okay, so Megan?
Here.
Erwin?
Present?
Let's see, Cynthia's in here. I'm here present. Let's see, I guess. Let's get started. After discussing this with Jason, we were going to start with an executive session, but we didn't get the proper citation settled. And so the information I think that actually was covered according to what Jason described to me was mainly procedural and things that weren't specifically confidential. So I think it'd be worthwhile maybe if you went over, and maybe Terry, you can chime in on, what the negotiating group has, covered thus far that isn't, covered by confidentiality at this point.
Yeah, I can do that. So I think, we only went in there with a few goals, which were to establish the negotiating teams on both sides. And they confirmed that it would be Catherine Maloney and Greg Franks. And then we wanted to figure out which documents we're going to work off of. Then I'm going to not specify at this time in open session what those are. And then we set a cadence for our meetings of what they would be, how many weeks they would be between each meeting, and then that we would meet early in the new year to sort of kick off the actual negotiation. And then I also mentioned that just today we received a package with Comcast's formal application, including Form 100, which is required for them to file in the renewal process. So we will be discussing that with Sue Buskey and looking for next steps on that. This may be similar to what Carlisle did, where they recently had a motion to deny. If Comcast submits a formal proposal, the town has to either accept or deny the proposal before the negotiation continues. So we literally just got it today. We haven't even scanned it yet. So we'll take a look at that and see what it contains and then go from there. And Terry, did you have anything else to add?
No, that covers it pretty well. Thanks, Jason.
I think one of the issues was, what model to use in terms of negotiations. And I guess you guys decided to use the earlier Concord contract. Is
That was the thing that I just omitted from the open session discussion.
oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I did have some questions probably that I want to ask at the next true executive session in January.
Yeah.
And they're related to, what some of the other towns are doing. But if there is any way that we can kind of exchange documents, not necessarily to deliberate, but, just a place to post documents so that somebody would be able to read them, in a confidential type of environment before the next meeting, because there are some things that I would like to put up there. And again, it's not for a deliberation online. It's really just so that people have access to the documents before our next meeting.
Yeah, I'll look into see what's possible and circulate as much as I can.
Okay, well then, let's see. I guess we've covered the territory as far as we can today. So the next thing are the next meeting times, and specifically, for January. And so I'm really available any Monday aside from the first one, which is January 1st, and it's a holiday anyway. I noticed that the reports in for the town annual report are due by, it's either the 18th or 19th. And that actually involves both the committee and MMN.
Mhm.
And one of the recommendations, in fact, that was sent out, along with that schedule for the report was that groups that have both a committee and an organization that, kind of report separately is to try to coordinate, both to save space and to make sure that, all the topics were covered.
Mhm.
So, I guess MMN can, prepare a report on what it's been doing. And it's interesting, and I'll pass it around. I think if Carlin had been able to sit in today, and actually I asked her if she could join us, she has a collection of some of the reports that were done in the past by MMN, and they're quite nice. They're not extensive, but they're, a page or two if you print them out,
Mhm.
that covers, how many events did they actually cover, what amount of time was expended,
Mhm.
Things of that nature. It was very informative. It was really, very nicely done. So that might be a model, that we probably want to abbreviate, but,
Yeah.
at least that might be a nice format that, MMN can use.
Yeah, we have access to those templates and those
Yeah.
past reports.
As a matter of fact, if you go back and look at the annual reports,
They're in there.
historically, you'll see them or find them.
Right.
And the way is to figure out then, if you really, somebody wants to read it out in print, is, how do you extract that page from the annual report? So, so if anybody has any preferences for dates in January on Monday, speak up. So hopefully we can get that, settled for today.
I think the 15th is Martin Luther King Day.
Oh, okay.
Have to
Yeah.
double check.
Yep, it is.
So maybe the 8th would be a better time.
Mhm.
One thing that we'll need to do as part of that annual report thing is, well, ideally is take a photo,
Mhm.
both of the committee and then either jointly or separately, the MMN group.
Mhm.
So that would suggest the 8th, nothing later
Right.
than that during the month.
So you want to say the 8th at 3:30?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
Erwin, does that work for you?
Probably not. Let me look. I'm actually going to Madison, Wisconsin that week. And let me just see if I can get this. Yeah, I am going on the 8th, and let me see what time the flight is. I land at 2:30. I theoretically could do it. Yeah, I should be able to do some of that. Assuming the planes are on time.
Hopping town. I have experience with a resident of Madison through his YouTube presence.
Oh,
He's actually an urban planner, and I don't actually know if he works for the state, or for a private consulting company.
oh, my daughter and grandchild live there, so I go there frequently.
Yeah, I've been there once or twice. Okay, so next subject is the minutes. And as it applies to from June 2023 on, the minutes have yet to be completed. But what I have today, and it's very close to being completed, is the minutes for September. And I think I copied everybody that's coming in on Zoom now on those. And this is a handout. And what's distinctive about these is that they are all AI generated.
Hmm.
Unedited. And as a matter of fact, this meeting is enabled for the, I think it's called the Zoom Assistant. But there isn't really any reason to use it today, actually. I was hoping maybe we could, but at least we have to do a little bit of a practice session beforehand, which we haven't had time to do. But in any case, this is an unedited summary that I did through Otter AI after the fact. That is, I took the October meeting and ran it through Otter after the meeting. But I haven't edited it. So the first page is an expanded summary, which means that the major highlight bullet points have been expanded. And as you look through that, in my opinion, it's actually pretty good, for the meeting. And, anybody that would want to go back and even look at a portion of the YouTube video of this meeting, I think to see that it's pretty accurate. The second page has a condensed form of that, which is really in the middle of the page there, and it's the same as the main form for people who don't want to do a lot of reading. And you may see an entry at the bottom of that. Let me see. There is, it's at the end of the expanded summary. There was actually the chapter and verse that we used to go into executive session. And that said, as Jason was mentioning, that I guess, is still applicable to our next session, maybe, although I have a comment on that. And that was 6, I believe, that had to do with real property. What Jason and I had started to discuss, and I actually don't even know if you had a chance to read what I said, and it doesn't make any difference because there was kind of a flurry of email going on. It dates back to the 12th, I think, of this month. And I had looked, and it seemed to me that I interpreted real property to mean real property, that is real estate. And obviously real estate there's so much law in real estate that, I would also agree with town council that whatever he has invoked before, that it's certainly good enough to use. But I did find on item 10 that applied really mainly to municipal utilities. And it looked like, in fact, that a lot of that had to do with electric utilities. So a lot of them had to do with the power plant. And certainly they do a lot of negotiation with outside providers. So it made perfect sense on several of those bullet points dealing with that specifically, but it didn't have anything to do with broadband necessarily. However, I did a search, and it was an AI search, by the way. So AI has come up in 2 contexts here, but anyway, there was an additional chapter or section that was done, I presume, after that item 10 had been released as it stands. And it applies to Mass General Law 164 and an item to be updated that specifically says, it's section 76D of Mass General 164. It specifically says cable TV companies and other public utilities to discuss trade secrets or confidential, competitive, sensitive, or other proprietary information to reconvene in open session at the end of the executive session. I put that in just because we were doing it, at the beginning rather than at the end. And it seemed that specifically since it mentioned cable TV companies, that it's unambiguous about what it is. So I think I'll pass it on to Kari anyway. Just maybe for the sake of future updating to the 10 points that were applicable. So.
Okay.
But I don't see any reason to change section 6 either, really,
Yeah.
since town council has, kind of officially blessed that at this
Right.
point. So anyway, in regard to the meeting minutes, the only thing that really prevents this from, being something to sign off on as is that there is not a specific listing of the votes that were taken. And that is one of the requirements of the open meeting law. And so there's still a little bit of editing to do on that. The action items aren't exactly correct at the end, but I think there's some names that didn't get cited properly. The one area that the editing here didn't cover is that, as you've heard on a lot of AI, it's got to be trained. And in the case of these meetings, they're smart enough now to be able to differentiate individual voices. But unless they know who that voice is beforehand, or unless they've been trained on who it is, and typically this may take, 1 or 2 or 3 usages of that voice in different meetings so that it gets kind of familiar with the variability of the equipment. I noticed at the meeting here in September, that you'll still see in this unedited version a lot of them that say speaker 2 or speaker 5 or something of that nature. Jason, it seems to pick up pretty well on you, but that may also be due to the fact that you are sitting closest to the little microphone there, even though those microphones are quite good. And the people that were farther away, like me, I had to retrain it on me. Although it has had some training on me for other meetings, and people like Erwin hasn't heard you too much, so you won't even find yourself mentioned in the attendees. So that was a piece of training that's still pending. What I do see, though, and I think it's something that has already been mentioned, that Zoom is starting to improve its own recognition quality, and I believe that they're kind of trying to normalize the volume, so if some people are speaking softly and some people are speaking quite loudly, that it's going to try to normalize things, just for the sake of what people are hearing in the meetings. And there's certainly some work could be done in post on that, but nobody's going to be reading much of this anyway, or even watching it on YouTube TV. So it certainly, I don't think it's worth doing much post as far as MMN is concerned. And at the speed that it's moving, and Google is getting incredibly good on this part, it looks like YouTube will improve itself via the advances that Google is making. As a matter of fact, a year from now, we may not have to do any of this, because we'll just say, give me the minutes, or whatever happened, at the PEG meeting in September, and then we'll come up. Nobody will bother with any of this stuff at all. The only thing that will be holding it back is whatever the legal requirements are for, for open meeting documentation.
Right.
And that'll take longer than anything else. As a matter of fact, it may never happen.
And is Otter AI, have you read their terms? Like, do we know their terms and everything?
We're
just not using?
We do, and they're, aren't any issues that prevents any of this coverage that isn't included in the contracts you currently have. I know that Otter is relatively expensive, so,
Yeah. Isn't it?
I don't know what else it might be used for, but
Would Zoom purchasing Otter, are some of those features included in Zoom accounts?
Otter has, a separate clientele, and I assume that, I don't know how they're gonna deal with their separate clientele.
I would imagine that there would be. This is a very, it's a very niche but common use case across every municipality in the country. That there are committees that have meetings and note taking has historically been a huge challenge. I would imagine that either one of the Gen AI products might lend itself better to it, or somebody will come up with a Gen AI product whose use case is specifically for this type of thing. I can poke around. I work at Forrester, and I can poke around and ask our Gen AI people if they've heard of anything percolating like this. The other thing you all should know is that the CEO of Forrester lives in Concord. It's been in town a long, long time. And, I'm bringing this up because Vince asked me about Forrester. And I don't know where he's at with, I don't know where, I see him once every 3 or 4 months, but, super nice guy. But, I don't know if there's a group of people in various commissions or town government that would like to hear from the CEO of Forrester as what his take on Gen AI is from a municipal perspective. I don't know if he can speak on it because he probably doesn't, quite think in that way. But if that's something of interest to more than the PEG committee, I would say a lot of different committees, maybe we can schedule something with him.
He lives in town, right, Erwin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be very valuable. I know that Diane Proctor knows him.
Yeah.
It may be worthwhile having a League Women Voters event.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if he would do it himself, because I think when you get into the niche use case, he probably couldn't speak to it. But he might have one of the analysts do something, or I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to ask him.
But, why don't you follow up on your end, and I'll mention it to Diane Proctor. I know she's mentioned him. It wasn't, in any specific context. She just mentioned that she's known him for quite a long time.
Yeah, well, let me find out if anybody is thinking about Gen AI at the sort of municipal level or government level. Because if nobody is, then it's, he could talk big picture. I don't know how helpful that would be. But let me I'll dig around a little bit.
Well, actually, I'd meant to include a link just to show how, fast the field is moving. But if you're familiar with Salesforce and Mark Benioff, and the people in town are familiar with him because they are a major contributor to Habitat for Humanity. So the recent Habitat houses that have gone in here in Concord, I think they're on their 3rd one now in the past couple of years. Salesforce is a big contributor to them.
Oh, interesting.
So they have an annual meeting in San Francisco that's called Dreamforce.
I'm very familiar with that.
And I don't know anybody else in their business career, either here or elsewhere, probably even uses Salesforce, in their organization. And in fact, it may be a fit for the government in Concord. But in any case, this entire Dreamforce said AI, 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 AI.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just, that's all we talk about. So, but I'm talking about that specific municipal meeting. There are probably other use cases, but I think the as they say, the low hanging fruit are these meetings that note taking is a real challenge for.
Vince, I think this whole AI topic is not really on your agenda. You have to stick to the agenda.
Well, I only raised it in the context of.
I understand, but I think we got way off there, so I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah, we want to keep moving along here anyway. So Our next topic is broadband update for Jason and company here. So
MMN update, you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I have a couple updates, but why don't you start so that I'll mention mine if you don't mention them.
So since our last meeting in November, Matt and I attended a conference called the Alliance for Community Media, the Northeast region, and happy to report that MMN won an award. Matt had created a video about the Carlisle Playground, and it won an award in the education category. So he won an ACM Nor'easter. That's what they call the award. And we both attended and learned a lot, met colleagues and sat in on seminars. And it was a very valuable conference where we learned a lot about how other stations are handling different things and networking opportunities. So we brought that award home. And then we've been doing filming some original programs in Concord. For example, we filmed the Concord Middle School topping off ceremony, where Lori Hunter spoke. And we have that up on YouTube, and it's close to 400 views so far. Yeah, so that's exciting. And then just last Friday, we filmed the Prism concert here at Concord Carlisle High School in the auditorium, which was a fabulous over 2 hours concert. It was just a spectacle. It was like they call it a kaleidoscope of performances. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Prism concert, but the students are not only performing on stage, but they sit in the audience and they perform. They're in the back, they're on the aisles, they're up on the catwalk. They're instrumental and vocal performances also. So we filmed that, and we worked with the music teachers, and so that'll be up on YouTube. Hopefully there won't be any copyright issues. So we'll get to that. And then lastly, we've opening the doors to our students. We're creating more student engagement. Jason and I met with Lori Hunter and both principals, because here at the high school they have co-principals. And we talked about opening the doors for students to come in again. And so far we have a student who's doing a podcast here called Concord Stories. We had 2 students who are working on a project in their French class, and they want to do a video. They need some help. Today we bumped into a teacher who would like to do some work with her weather club. And then lastly, we had a visual arts teacher who came in here and asked us to help us create some videos with his students.
And also, we're going to be talking to them at their leadership meeting at a future date to sort of drum up support from all the teachers to start thinking about the studio as a resource for the students. So it's very exciting to see that. They were very happy that we would come to see them.
They were
excited by the possibilities. It's been kind of quiet since COVID. So
yeah. And then one of the co-principals came down here and we gave her a tour. So that was nice to see. Yeah.
So in addition to the Comcast negotiations, I also wanted to mention that we'll be installing some new cameras over at Ripley next week, a week and a half ago. So that will round out all the equipment replacements over at Ripley and hopefully dramatically improve the quality of those meetings. I want to thank Julie and her team again for the work they've done to improve the quality of the select board and FinCom meetings and anything that happens at the townhouse. They've sort of changed the way that they film those meetings and the way they switch them live. So it's resulted in a much higher quality video where you can actually see people's mouths move. And there are tight shots where you can see speakers talking as opposed to sort of a room shot A and B. So it's gotten a lot more sophisticated. And so that's great. We're also hiring one more videographer just because we have people who are seasonal or who kind of come and go. And we'd like to have a full complement of videographers available to cover big events. The townhouse renovation project is on our agenda, and that is to basically rework all of the equipment in the townhouse, because right now you can only go live from either the select board meeting room or the hearing room. we'd like to separate those so you can kind of do simultaneous productions. And also it's time for an upgrade of some of that equipment. Some of it's quite old. And we're working with the town manager's office in potentially reorienting some equipment in the hearing room just to make sure that it's available for any sort of design that they have. And then the last thing is we're working on doing a test for a town meeting. So traditional town meeting has been, we have the auditorium and we have the gymnasium, and the majority of the folks are in the gymnasium, but then auditorium is a secondary location, and our vendor runs cables between the two. And it's quite a lot of preparation, a lot of testing goes into that. And we're going to try something new to do a test and proof of concept to see if we can make a reliable sort of connection like Zoom that would work, to cut back both on the RFP and also allow a remote site. The moderator is interested in exploring alternative locations, maybe one in West Concord. So we want to see if that's something that's viable with our existing equipment without having to really replace anything or purchase anything new. So we'll be hopefully doing that later this week, but potentially sometime soon. But either way, sometime soon.
One thing, Jason, that you and I have discussed is what Telview is doing. And I actually want to describe what Telview does, but what we had discussed is the fact that they're coming out with new apps, call them mobile apps, but basically they'll play on any device, including TVs in some case. In particular, if people have a Roku TV currently, they can get an app. And for people that like to watch, any town activities from MMN, I like to watch things on my TV screen at home. And this app makes it much more user friendly, rather than even trying to look it up on YouTube. Or on the town website, on the MMN page, which is almost impossible to find things sometimes. But anyway, I think we had discussed that, and it's something I think that you actually had in process, right?
So we have a quote for that. We're going through the procurement process to replace all of our broadcast equipment. And we're not yet certain which vendor will be successful based on the process that we have to go through. So whatever vendor we end up with, our hope is that we can offer a solution like that.
So a time frame that you have on that?
We're kind of at the liberty of the finance department, who is handling the procurement piece of that. We're ready to go. So hopefully in the next couple months, I would hope that we'd see something.
Now, is it kind of an either or thing in total, or is it, I believe that Telview had some data storage that was getting used for older meetings or something. I forgot what it was, but
yeah, I mean, we're using multiple Telview products today for broadcast equipment, for the info views and for the storage, the archival storage.
Yeah, scheduling.
Yeah. Well, one of the things on these mobile and TV apps is that they're basically a subset of digital signage, that's used for a number of things. And digital signage, I think, is kind of a future role to play. You see it at the library, for instance, when you see that big screen, near the checkout desk. But it has a role to play, in a number of the public locations, and maybe even ultimately in some point at places like the institutional settings in the housing authority, for instance. It's kind of thing that's used in nursing homes and assisted living places like that, just to keep people aware of what's going on and what activities, get done. So this idea of covering government meetings and things of that nature is kind of a specialized case, one of the specialized cases for digital signage. There's one interesting thing that people are doing in other parts of the country, and I believe these are, kind of model sites for Telview, because I looked at their website about some of the other locations they serve. And in addition to just covering PEG activities, they often have other organizations that then become kind of channels, if you will, on their app. So some of them would have like a local educational institution, like a college or something of that nature. In the case of Concord, it would be very worthwhile to see about partnering up with Carlisle, so that when people were tuning in to Concord for coverage of particularly the government stuff, that they would also, be able to find the Carlisle stuff and vice versa, of course. Because again, the thing about these is that it makes it much easier to use, in fact. Beyond that, there's other applications that end up being two-way. And this would apply to particularly Wayland, I think, because I know it's something that, the town moderator has mentioned, Carmen Reese, that they have started doing electronic voting, at least for, the municipal elections and the town meeting. And, she had experimented with that several years ago in Concord, and it wasn't too well received. But on the other hand, she's kind of kept her fingers on the pulse of what other towns are doing. And it looks like it will be coming sooner or later. So this type of, app runs on a phone, among other things. And the phone is actually the most secure device that anybody has, and would ultimately be, what would be used for this voting type activity. So again, there's some serendipity here that would ultimately maybe be involved, as we look downstream. So how far is downstream? Well, maybe 5 years, not more than 10 years. Is 5 years optimistic? I don't know, Erwin. That might be one of the things to cover in any presentation with AI. How fast is it going to get adopted? And, what is the coverage going to be in a kind of a pragmatic way, forgetting the concern about the AI overlords. Anyway,
Everyone predicts it's going to be faster than folks have planned. Unlike most things, which take twice as long, it might take half the time.
so I can't think of anything else on the programming.
I had one thing I sent a note to Vince about. Now that the year is almost over, it'd be great, maybe for the January, it might be too early, or the February meeting, to get a report from MMN around how many hours I think might be the best construct as opposed to programs. How many hours of programs, and I'm not sure how you track them, so I'm going to say it, but I may not be, but we don't think about it that way. How many hours of program were shown were government meetings, and P or E or G. But I'm curious, how do you sort of code content so we can sort of look a little bit more narrowly than just total number of hours? I don't know if it's live meetings versus playbacks of meetings. There are a lot of ways of slicing and dicing. I'm just curious, how do you think about the programming, and is there a way to pull that data relatively easily without having to go through every program for the year?
I helped on the annual report last year. One of the things that we do is, programming uploaded to YouTube or a number of hours of government meetings. It's hard to differentiate. Some of the programs can air on all the channels or two of the channels. So how do you differentiate, a school committee meeting that might have an educational component? Is it a government meeting? Is it a school, education thing? So we try to count things just once, but our buckets were like government meetings, education programming, and then community programming. So that's kind of how we did it last time.
Does it make any sense to, with the new year coming, to think about some sort of recategorization? Because I assume there'll be a report based upon that construct, and that construct may be fine, but it might be worth thinking about, you know, how to make it, slice it a little bit narrower. So
Yeah, well, I
there's-
think, you know, in conversation with the Teleview, regards to Teleview things, I think once we have a place where meetings have attributes, we can report on them all sorts of different ways. I think right now, we can certainly report by how many school committee meetings, how many PEG access meetings, how many whatever. But I think the question is, what is most useful for the public to see? And, you know, is it to try to look year over year? Is it try to see what sort of content are we creating? What kind of new content are we creating? How much are we airing? What's going on the channel? Do you know if Teleview has the ability to pull statistics?
Yes, in Teleview, you can run reports by channel. So, you know, when we upload onto the Hypercast or all of our government meetings, we upload that specifically to the Gov channel, so they can run reports based on PE or G.
Erwin, did you
None of
have ideas in mind for buckets that we put things in?
I'm thinking like, you know, this, you know, it's clearly like live versus on versus replay. So I'm sure government, I don't know for sure. Do government meetings get replayed, or is it they're live and then done?
Yes.
They do get played. Yeah.
Right. So how many hours, you know, a year, I guess, are live government meetings versus replays of government meetings? Same would be somewhat true education, because I assume some of the education is school committee type things. On the PEG, it'd be interesting to see how much is new content versus replay, and how much of it is an local content versus like when I ran public access stations, you know, we imported programming from other places. How much is local made versus import?
Some of that's in the report already.
Okay.
Okay, as far as the YouTube stuff is concerned, YouTube gathers statistics also, and Jason, you and I haven't discussed that before, so I think one of the things, well, I believe you were doing some kind of a summary periodically at this point already, aren't you?
Yeah.
But one of the things that you mentioned, a lot of that is available in the YouTube statistics, when it's in fact are, you know, a variation on the general Google statistics, you know, about viewership, where does the audience come from, how many hours do they spend, how do they navigate the site, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That has been difficult because I've asked, you know, the previous town manager assistant about doing that with Civics Plus, you know, who is the provider of the town website. But I'm not, the answer seemed to be that it was hard to separate that out based on how it's contained in their hierarchy of, you know, menus and locations, and the level of depths that you have to click, you know, before you get to something. Google actually covers the town website pretty well. Sometimes when I want to find something, it's faster to ask Google where it is rather than to go to various links, you know, that are up on the town website. So I think that it's going to be worthwhile trying to see both for the town and for MMN, specifically if we can get, you know, good Google stats.
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts. There's obviously the viewership, and there's the delivery. And the viewership doesn't, you know, I mean, the viewership talks about, you know, promotion, you know, promoting content. If you promote it, can you have any impact in the viewership?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
think that's something I'm going to bring up when we get deeper into the contract, is to set aside money for promotion of the content, not just purely for the creation of it. Because if you create it but nobody watches it, then the value is a lot less. But that's for another meeting. But Jason, could you send the copy of the annual report of last year's
Yeah. I mean,
2022?
search annual town report Concord MA. I can send it to you though.
Yeah. But I'm curious to see what it looks like, then say, oh, well, what would be really helpful is this, and it may not be able to be done for 2023, because you may not think about it that, that way, or tagging it that way. But as we go into next year, it'd be good to tweak the model a little bit.
When somebody makes something that you guys produce, does it belong to them or does it belong to? Who does it belong to?
We do some original programming.
Yeah,
Both.
okay, so they could repost it to their own.
Yeah.
I thought I knew that, I just wanted to clear that.
No, yeah.
Is there kind of a standardized requirement there? When, if you're producing something that obviously is of interest to the town,
Mhm.
but, has been done by people who also want to use it for something. I'm thinking, for instance, of the You Raise Me Up video that was done.
We're just looking at that today.
Mhm.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that was, masterfully done. Joseph Marr, who has, I think, 3 kids in the school system,
Mhm.
or he did at the time that was done anyway. Is also, or was also an executive at Nesson, I think. I think he was a VP of programming at Nesson anyway. So he has a background in it. And, he kind of did the overall production. Clearly, it's been available on the website.
Yeah, so that video has the most views of
Yes.
anything posted on our YouTube channel. That
I
video.
thought the TIC seminar had that.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, we gotta check it out. What is showing it to me?
Yeah.
Well, there's another one that was done, and this was
Line.
several years ago
Okay.
now. And again, it was the most viewed video on MMN for a
Mhm.
number of years, I think, was a video done by the Orchard House, the Alcott House, and it was called the Women of Orchard House or the Women of Alcott House. I don't remember.
Okay.
And that was actually originally an outside production that was done, to do up as a documentary. And there was a very substantial amount of money spent on it. But then, personnel changed or budgets changed or something, and it never got finished. But it got picked up, and actually, there were a couple of people involved from MNN on kind of an ongoing basis. One of them was Sam Kruger,
Mm-hmm.
whom, at least Jason, you're familiar with. I don't know, anything about the Kruger family, but there were 3 brothers there that all in one way or another have been involved with MMN, but he kind of picked up what they had done and helped the Orchard House management there to complete it. So, and that, I believe that one also won a local Emmy. The credit went to the, director of Orchard House.
Mhm.
And Sam got credit also, as one of the participants in that.
Mhm.
I think there was somebody else at MMN did too, but that for many years was the most widely used
That's
video.
great.
But I don't believe that MMN has unlimited rights to have that. I don't think it's there now. So I, was just wondering, is it worth, looking at those policies?
Yeah, our policy now is that if something is open to the public and we're going to put it on the channel, we cover it at no cost to the organizers of the event. But if something is closed to the public, costs money, and they want to own the content and they don't want it to be released by us, then they pay for our production.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, but so for the middle school, if they wanted to do like, we're doing our first like international celebration. So if they wanted to film that, that would not cost.
I mean,
much.
if
Not
it's something that
necessarily
we can
open.
air, that there's
Yeah.
public
Okay,
for,
got it.
then we don't charge.
Okay.
It's only for things we can't air the content for, because then
Like
it's
somebody's
like,
private event.
Yeah,
That they want to,
yeah.
That makes sense.
so even private events, if they cost money, that's okay as long as we can air.
Oh,
the
okay.
content.
That makes sense.
And we were like, there was Jane Goodall came, and that was one of the things where they paid for that production, and we did it, and we'd love to be able to air it, but we need their permission to be
Right.
able to broadcast it.
If we can get content out of it and air it.
Then it's,
Yeah. Well, I know there's one group, it's the Thoreau Society, that has a meeting every year.
Yeah.
Part of it is public and most of it is private though, so I think,
Hmm.
what MMN was collecting, on the private part.
Mhm.
But, kind of retain some rights, because some of their meetings were public.
Mhm.
Okay, so. Anybody else have any questions on MMN? Updates? One thing I wanted to ask, since we have new members, is, what people's personal interests are, particularly in doing something in relation to MMN. As an example, Carlin, before she left, had started a little interview program on MMN called First Look. And, there's been so much turnover in town personnel recently that was one of the first interviews that was done of Terry LaFleur after she became town manager. And, she'd also interviewed some of the other town officials, the police chief and the fire chief, I think, on what was going on in their neck of the woods. And, it's a public service programming and something that, actually became, I don't want to call it a compliment maybe to what the bridge does, in terms of covering town activities and events. But so that was an interest of Carlin's, and I was wondering if there's anybody else here, Megan or Irwin, if there's any programming that you can think of that you would be interested in doing, being producer, not necessarily an on-screen presence, but
so many
anything
ideas.
else.
That's the problem, is I have too many ideas.
Oh,
I'm just not very organized. So, yeah.
You can throw them at us and we'll.
Well, my son had brought up going to the Council on Aging and having middle schoolers interviewing some of the people who are just asking them questions about what their life was like, or what it was like when they were 11, 12 years old. I thought that was really super cute and thoughtful. And then there's so much going on in Concord. I don't know. Have you thought of anything, Vince?
There's, I think, you've started covering it, the array of events. One thing that, again, is kind of related to viewership, that hasn't come up before is, when it was still CCTV, they were doing a series of interviews with the local businesses. And really, it's partly economic vitality in terms of our local businesses, but it turned out that one of the ones that had very good viewership was a clothing reseller, basically, that would sell used clothes, although fairly high quality ones. And it got an incredible number of views just because people, I guess, were interested in the store and things of that nature. So, I think that idea of, the economic vitality but that's not me personally, but Irwin, I don't know if you had any thoughts on area of interest.
I've always thought of, because I live on White Pond, of every morning for a half hour is going live from White Pond, just camera on the pond, because every day it's different.
Yeah.
So we could use my deck. I don't know how you go live from my house, but and sometimes it'll be bright and sunny, and sometimes it'll be dark, like at 7:30 in the morning. But and play,
Yeah, we do have town infrastructure on White Pond. We have that
Ooh.
shed there. We have fiber to it, so
That's
we can go.
at the beach.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
It wouldn't be hard to set up I've got a little security camera I've set up outside, but I guess if you had I don't know how you pull it off, but before programming starts, I don't know what time programming starts, at 7:30 to 8 every morning, see what's happening on the pond.
I like that.
Well, speaking of pond, and I don't know if the state park system would agree to it, but having just a cam looking at Walden.
Well, that would be tough probably to get. You probably need the governor to. There's a very funny story about someone on the pond who was just changing their dock, and literally the governor had to sign off on the person changing their dock.
Uh,
So I'd keep away from from Walden.
Yeah, yeah, lots of good ideas.
Okay, well, let's see. Moving on then to item 5, the mission statement. And I have a handout on that. I don't really think that we'll get to cover too much. And I believe everybody that's sitting in remotely now, I believe I copied you all on this, so you should see the PDF on it.
Oh, thanks.
But I know this is a subject that I guess, Terry, we discussed with Carlin, to some extent. And, just as the overall background, the PEG Access Advisory Committee is in a way a kind of a extension of the Cable TV Committee. And the Cable TV Committee has always had a kind of a Rip Van Winkle existence. That is, it would come into being every 10 years to negotiate a Comcast contract and then go back to sleep, until the next 10 years where they came to negotiate the contract again. Now, they did have some other responsibilities that I frankly couldn't find much detail on in terms of what was retained in terms of minutes of things of that nature. But MMN, they did have some oversight role in what MMN was doing. That, however, dealt primarily with MMN as a 501(c) corporation because, of course, that had to be negotiated. And, some kind of at least review of the annual report that they have to make. But, ideally along the lines of what we said, where MMN would actually provide, a more detailed report on their programming, partly for reporting purpose, but partly really for information purposes. Now that has changed since it's become a town department, so it's become something that operates somewhat differently. But anyway, that was kind of the extent to which the PEG Access Committee had a role until 2017. And that was the transition between the, nonprofit corporation and, the takeover as a town department. So on that basis, it became more of an ongoing role. But the question is, is that something that's necessary on an ongoing basis? From an accounting standpoint, if nothing else, it's been a bookkeeping role. It's been somewhat questionable because it is not an enterprise fund like the other town utilities, and unlike BD Center, which is an enterprise fund. And in many ways, that applies to not MMN specifically, but to Concord Lake Broadband. And again, we have to remember that the PEG Access Committee really has to do with cable TV programming and not internet. On the other hand, based on what has happened with the FCC, since they've now invoked DirecTV and Dish TV as providers that they have control over, they they provided cable TV service, but satellite TV is now becoming internet service as well. And, you know, from what Sue, among other people, have said, it's almost all moot because there is not going to be a separate wire and a cable TV service. It's all going to be on the internet. It's all going to be through packets. It's all going to be through the internet cable anyway. So they're basically merging, and what that really suggests is that either the PEG Access Advisory Committee deals with both Concord Light Broadband and Comcast and fixed wireless in particular, you know, as all different service providers, or whether their role goes away completely because there's not any cable TV any longer. And that's mainly a political issue more than anything else. And I don't think that's a statement on my part, because I think everybody more or less acknowledges that the FCC operates according basically to what party is in power at the time. And also because the issues that they deal with are so arcane that, you know, it's really can do what it wants based on the fact that nobody understands what they're doing to begin with. But on that basis, as long as we're here, you can take a look through this document, and maybe we can take this up again, and I'll put it on the agenda for January. Kind of a summary is that there are two things that everybody that looked into MMN, many on an academic basis in Harvard Law, the Brookings Foundation, and our other local and at least the Atlantic Coast think tanks have come up with, is that the two basic things that PEG Access is involved with are government and sports, municipal sports. Everybody seems to want to know, you know, what the high school teams are doing. After that, everything is kind of up for grabs. So certainly it's possible within the area of the P and PEG and the education and PEG to, you know, come up and approach that however people want. In the case of education, some MMN operations seem to treat that kind of as adult education. Some treat it as kind of a training ground for students, and, you know, maybe the ideal thing is to do some of both. But again, you know, that looks like it's an option based on what all of the kind of the learned authorities have done as far as, you know, looking into the subject. The other thing is that PEG operations basically have access to a very large amount of money. And if you look at this report, particularly the next to the last page, you'll see a table. And this was done up by, I think it was Portland University, that reviewed basically all of the major PEG operations in the country, and also the way that the franchise fee that's available, you know, through the various ISPs is utilized. And, you know, for instance, if you look at New York, for example, they get $160 million in franchise fee funds. And this information is a little bit dated, but in fact, if anything, it's gone up since then. or at least not gone down significantly. You know, it's the franchise fees have gone down. But now if you look over at the following, columns, you'll see that how those franchise fees are utilized really either is unascertainable or it is consciously used for other purposes. So if you look at the last column, you'll see how much that this particular study has been able to find out of what was expended, actually for the PEG operations. And you'll see in the case of New York, for instance, that out of their money, a great deal of it, has gone to other purposes. So that
Other purposes, you mean like potholes, or other purposes that are sort of tangential?
sometimes it's used for general revenue.
Okay.
In the case of New York, I think it's tended to have been used for other, I guess we'd call it worthy expenditures in, subsidized housing,
Right.
things of that nature, that really worthwhile civic expenditures.
Yeah, that's,
Which, it's hard to dispute in any case. So, so one of the issues is that I think that Sue was mentioning that there is a Massachusetts statute about what PEG funds are used for. I believe if you look at that closely, that it's how the capital funds are used. But in any case, one of the reasons that they end up getting used this way is that there is no formalized SEC reporting, and there are no penalties, for not using it that way. So this really just comes up, in the context of MMN, is to decide how some of the funding may get used for things other than programming. For instance, the question has come up as to how, for instance, the people that can't afford cable TV service could get it, the Concord Light broadband service, through some funding that could be generated out of their equivalent of a franchise fee. They don't currently have a franchise fee, and for various reasons, they are protected because of the fact that they are a fairly small ISP. On the other hand, on their own, they could say, well, we can do something equivalent to what's currently being done with the, the property tax at this point, is that we could make it somewhat progressive and have a rate that was more for higher end subscribers versus those who can't really afford it. It's just an opportunity. But
I need to interrupt. I have a hard out in like 7 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so, but anyway, I knew that we wouldn't get into this, and I don't know if anybody has any comments about this is worthwhile pursuing. Carrie, I don't know if you think that this is specifically in the context of the mission statement or a future version of the mission statement. But, otherwise, I will put it on the agenda for, January.
And that's just what do we do, or what would be
What are the options? And,
Okay.
How should we be treating, in particular, broadband generally, as it becomes indistinguishable from, the other things that cable TV is used for currently. Same equipment that I think that Comcast offers for both. So let's see, we have item 6, which is liaison reports. I don't know who is on the line. I don't think we saw anybody from DOA. I don't think we saw Christina on the line. Nancy, if you have any comments on Carlisle, hi, Nancy, you still there? Maybe she fell asleep.
No, I'm here. I just. Oh, and my trap cat. I'm sorry. No, no, I got it to work now. No, I don't have any comments. Thank you for asking.
Okay, and so I don't think we see any public here, do we?
I have one question, Jason, for the proposal you get from Comcast, is that a public document or is that still private because it's just a proposal and what's the point?
Question that I don't know the answer to yet, but I will find out.
Because if it's public, it'd be great to see it.
Absolutely.
If it's, I can understand why it would not be, however, so.
Well, in
Okay.
our next executive session, I'll definitely outline what's in
Right,
the
right.
proposal if I can't release it, but if I can, happy to share with everybody.
Yeah, what is the overall timeline look like now, through the point when the contract is signed?
So our plan is to meet in early January. We don't have a date yet because we're waiting to hear from Sue for when she's ready for the next step. Meet early January, set a cadence of a few weeks between meetings to give each party a chance to do their homework. And then make a determination, probably end of February, early March, on whether we think the timetable is feasible. And if it isn't, make a request for extension. And if it is, keep working. And then, we've been told it's likely that an extension will be necessary. So don't expect that it will be done by April, but if it goes really well, then maybe to.
Very good. Well, if there are no further questions from anybody here or in the public, I can declare this meeting adjourned.
Needing to vote for that.
Yeah, that's a point I'm gonna raise,
Okay.
but, if I can have a motion to adjourn,
So moved?
okay, let's have a roll call. Megan,
Present, or what do I say?
you say aye.
Yeah.
Berwin,
Aye.
and I, Vince Carlson, say aye, so we are officially adjourned.